Thank you for joining us today for Armchair Historians. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cannon. Armchair Historians is a Belgian Rabbit production. Stay up to date with us through Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Wherever you listen to your podcast, that is where you'll find us. You can also find us at armchairhistorians.com. Also, won't you consider becoming a patron of the show? In an effort to keep Armchair Historians commercial-free, I have decided to work with Patreon. Now, if you mosey on over to www.patreon.com/armchairhistorians, that's historians with an S, you can find out more about supporting the show and about exclusive patron content that you will have access to. You can chip in anywhere from $1 to $15 a month or just make a one-time donation. You will be helping me to keep the lights on. And if you can't make a donation, that's totally cool. I just hope you will continue to listen to our free podcast. I recently spoke to YouTube celebrity Julian McDonnell. He's the host of Joolz Guides. That's Joolz Guides. For more information, go to joolzguides.com. Julian has over 140,000 followers on his YouTube channel. He was gracious enough to accept my invitation because, as he said, "You sounded like a normal person." I'm not so sure about that. As I was doing the introduction in the actual interview, I totally screwed up. I'm so embarrassed because I mispronounced his name as McDonald with a D, even though I had it written down correctly and I knew what it was. So embarrassing. Anyway, so I went back and recorded the introduction post-interview. So without any further ado, our guest today is Julian McDonnell. Julian is an actor, filmmaker, and YouTube channel celebrity from London. He has appeared in television, commercials, stand-up comedy, street entertainment shows, and he even ran away with the circus once. Julian is an award-winning documentary filmmaker. His films include My Evil Trade and my personal favorite, Take Me to Pitcairn. He has a degree in philosophy from the University of Manchester, speaks Italian and French. He's a musician who plays piano, guitar, and sings. Julian also ran his own radio show on Riverside FM in Hammersmith and Fulham, as well as doing voiceover work and audiobooks. He has his own production company, Joolz Productions. His YouTube channel, Joolz Guides, that's Joolz Guides, boasts 140,000 followers and has a regular slot on the Londonist. Joolz Guides features Julian donning bowler hat, umbrella in hand, wearing a vintage tailored jacket and skillfully tied cravat, showing viewers around London. The show is described as mini videos which take you on some unusual London walks to all the places you wouldn't find in your average guidebook. Not only are they informative, Julian draws upon his mad performance skills to make them quite entertaining. Joolz Guides is not your normal travel videos by any stretch of the imagination. Julian McDonnell, welcome and thank you for being here.
Oh, well, that was quite some introduction. Goodness. I mean, I think what you've actually done there is you found a lot of information from my from my website, which I must have written a long time ago when I was trying to impress everybody. And when you're trying to buff up your CV and you write loads of stuff in it and say, well, yeah, I've got the radio station and all this stuff. What do you want to do? I'm afraid I haven't revised or anything, so you'll just have to ask me what you want to know.
Okay. Well, first of all, how are you doing in lockdown?
I'm all right. Yeah, it's not too bad. It's quite a nice day. Been writing a book, so it's actually it's not vastly different from how life normally is.
Oh, okay. What are you writing?
It's just something to go with the videos, like a London guidebook.
Oh, okay, cool. I really enjoyed London Lockdown. So at the time of the interview, London Lockdown was the most recent installment of Juolz Guides, in which Julian takes us for a little walk along the River Thames in London, sans his camera guy during the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic lockdown.
Oh, thank you very much. That's good.
It was, I was there a year ago at this very time, and it was nothing like what it looked like in lockdown.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. It's actually quite nice now. I quite like it all like empty, and I haven't been feeling 100%, so but that's a bit annoying. But yeah, it's just really pleasant without loads of people in the streets and out the cars and all the nice unpolluted air. It's stressful going to do shopping though.
Oh,
Isn't it?
yeah.
Not nice going into shops with other people.
Are you freaked out about the germs and all that, or do you wear a mask?
No, I don't wear a mask, but yeah, I mean, no one wants to catch it,
Yeah, well, we were sick. My boyfriend works for one of the ski areas in Colorado here, and he got sick, and we think he probably had it, but of course there's no test, so we don't know. We're hoping to get.
No idea whether you got it or not.
Yeah, he had all the symptoms though. Unfortunately, he didn't, get really, really sick, and I didn't have any symptoms. Knock on wood. I hope so.
Anyway, yes, how can I help you? Let's do this thing.
The question that I'm going to ask you, and I have no idea what you're going to say, is what is your favorite history?
My favorite period of history?
Just history in general, whether it's a person, a place, an event, time period.
Oh, gosh, it's difficult. It's difficult to say. I rather like. There's a few of them. I rather like King Charles II. I think it might have something to do with the fact that we actually have some sort of record of it, like as in first-hand account because of Samuel Pepys. By the way, I'm not really an expert historian or anything. In case you think I am, I'm not. I'm just a bloke who makes films about London. I don't really.
Well, and that's what I'm trying to do with the new podcast, is to talk to people who like certain things about history, who get excited about history. My first interview was with a historian, but and he's one of my best friends, and he's really got a great sense of humor. So right there, I'm referring to episode 1, which is in 3 parts. And if you have not listened to it already, I highly recommend it. I had the pleasure of speaking to Kevin Kuharik, who is the executive director of the Hotel de Paris Museum in Georgetown, Colorado. I'm just interested in people who are interested in history, talking about the history.
London. I like London history, I suppose. I mean, that's because I live here, and I like wandering around and looking at things which are weird or sticking out of a wall or some strange sort of monuments that not everyone's ignoring, and just things like that. I like thinking about all the people who are now dead who have drank in the same pub as me. It's those pubs are very historical. I like those things, and yeah, the time around Charles II, because I mean he was quite fun. I think he was quite fun.
I don't really know too much about him, so maybe you can just tell me.
Well, what happened is that they chopped his dad, King Charles I. There was this revolution, and they chopped his head off. And then they had this bloke called Oliver Cromwell, who was in charge of something called the Commonwealth, I think they called it. And that was for about 10 years or so. We had this kind of Commonwealth. We didn't have a king. Anyway, so he started acting a bit like a king, I think. And they all got fed up with him in the end. And I think they got rid of Oliver Cromwell because he was so miserable. He broke down the Shakespeare's Globe Theatre because he didn't like. They were puritanical. They didn't like theatres. They didn't like having fun. He didn't like breweries. He didn't like beer. I don't know. Just
what's the
like
point? Yeah.
Anyway, so they got rid of him. I think he ended up being hanged in the end. I think they hanged him, or maybe not. Well, I know. Well, but then they decided to reinstate King Charles II, and King Charles II was a lot of fun, and he liked to go out, and so he opened up all the theatres, and he did played lots of games and had lots of mistresses, and he was yeah.
It was like getting rid of prohibition.
Yeah, exactly. It was party time, and he had those lovely dogs as well, the King Charles Spaniels, which are named after him. And actually, and it's just interesting. Well, because it was so long ago. When was it? Oh my God, 1600s, in the 1600s. And we got Samuel Pepys, this famous bloke who wrote a diary around that time, and he writes all about the fire of London, the Great Fire of London that happened around then, the plague, which is quite apt at the moment.
Was Charles king when the fire happened?
Yeah. He also writes about the time when they dug up Oliver Cromwell's body. That's right. I don't think Oliver Cromwell was actually hanged originally, but because they hated him so much afterwards, they exhumed his body.
That's right. Okay,
and then
I know
they
that
posthumously hanged him.
Yeah.
At Tyburn Gallows,
right.
And Samuel Pepys writes an account of this hanging of a dead corpse. She says was pretty grim. So that's a nice time. Well, I mean, fun time in history. There's lots of characters. Yes, there's a character called John I think he's called John Wilmot, the Earl of Rochester. He was actually played by Johnny Depp in a film called The Libertine. Have you ever seen the film?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a great poet, and he used to write lots of satirical poems and rude, bawdy poems about the royal family. But King Charles quite liked him, actually. He famously had a bunch of people beaten up. There was another poet called John Dryden. He got a load of his mates to beat him up in an alleyway in Covent Garden. I just like the fact that these things all happened around that time, and it just seemed very decadent and well, a lot of things you could make a film out of anyway.
What about it struck a chord with you?
A lot of the stories, whenever I'm wandering around London and finding out something interesting or fun that happened, because I like to make videos about stuff if there's a fun anecdote to tell. And whenever there's an anecdote to tell, I always look it up, and then I've discovered it happened during the time of King Charles II, which I just find there's so many things about it. Like, for example, he had so many mistresses, and he had that mistress called Nell Gwynn, who was a famous actress at the time. Our royal family always like getting together with actresses for some reason. It's we've got the Duke of Cambridge at the moment with one. We had King Edward VII. He went off with Lily Langtry. She was an actress. And and then there was King Edward VIII, who abdicated over. I know she wasn't an actress. She was an American. But,
he was an American.
So
close
different. Enough. Yeah. So I like, but I like the fact that he had. For example, there's a house in Pall Mall. All the houses in Pall Mall on one side of the road, they all belong to the Crown. Except one house, because King Charles's number 79 Pall Mall, let's see, King Charles's mistress, she wanted a house near the palace, and so he gave her that one. But she said, no, wait a minute, I want to own it outright. I want to own the whole, freehold of the property. I want to know, I'm not just like a lease, because he gave her a long lease on the property. And she said, no, otherwise, you give me the freehold, otherwise I'm no more nookie. And and so he had to convey it to her by Act of Parliament. And then it got passed down through her family and then sold off or whatever. And
so it's not in her family anymore.
I don't think it's in her family anymore, but I think, but it's no longer in the royal family's collection. So it's quite a unique house. And she also. He fathered many illegitimate children, and one day I think he was playing with the child, and King Charles was present, and she said, "Come over here, you little bastard." And the king said, "Well, why did you call our son that?" And she said, "Well, because you haven't given him a proper title. I have to call him a bastard, which is what he is." And so the king ended up saying, okay, I'll call him the Duke of St. Albans or something. So I think they all became dukes and had got these titles, all his bastard sons.
She was a savvy woman. I like her.
Yeah. Well, she was cool. She was funny.
That's what I like about your videos, is that, and it's what you just said. It's, it draws you in, about history. And what just clicked with me when you were talking is there's that you talk about stuff in a humorous way, and it keeps me engaged. It's not one of those dry, boring, tourism videos. And so, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I like, the fact that you pick unseen parts of London that you wouldn't see. And there's so many of them, isn't there? Like I lived in London in 2012, and I walked every single day, sometimes the same way, but I always found something new to look at and to be curious about. That's what I love about London. So
someone wrote to me yesterday that I think it was one of my subscribers. They said Charles Dickens, he used to do that. He walked around London so much, and and he knew it so well that if he saw a new piece of orange peel on the ground, he'd take note of it. I suppose the Victorians is the other time, yeah, because Victorian London, a lot of the buildings are still here from Victorian London, and you can see evidence of it, especially if you look upwards. You see all these nice old buildings, and we see so many films, and so we're so familiar with things like Charles Dickens, Oliver Twist, and things like that. That when you walk past one of these places, it's really fascinating to see that they actually existed in full color back then. They weren't black and white kind of funny Charlie Chaplin style walking funny. They were real places. So I recently was walking along, and I found the original workhouse where Oliver Twist was based on, the workhouse that Oliver was sent to.
And it's still there.
No, it's been turned into luxury flats, I think. But
is it the original building?
I think the building is still there. Yeah.
Wow.
And there's lots of these. The other one where Charlie Chaplin was with his mum. That I go to that one in my video about.
Later on in the interview, we'll talk more in depth about the time that Julian took two of Charlie Chaplin's grandchildren on a tour of Charlie Chaplin's London, basically. So not only did he take them on a tour, he actually made an episode which was released January 19th, 2020 on his YouTube channel. And it's called Charlie Chaplin Tour, I believe. Hands down, it to date is my favorite Juolz Guides episode.
I go there with Charlie Chaplin.
I know. I just watched your whole catalog. Bob and I just watched it this weekend.
All right. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's so interesting to go, because that was in Victorian times that he was there. I mean, he was
late Victorian.
And to go there with his grandchildren and see this kind of place which is real to them. We're looking at a building which is now the Cinema Museum, but they're looking at it and going, well, my grandfather had to go into this workhouse, and they were really grim, horrible places. And it's just like you see in all these Sherlock Holmes films and these Charles Dickens stories. I don't know. It's just my history is just not particularly accurate. I don't care if I make get the wrong dates or something. Sorry, I keep getting distracted because I'm in front of a window and people walk past and wave at me and stuff. But it's not to do with that. For me, I don't care whether it was in 1898 on the 4th of July. I don't have to be accurate about it. For me, it's just interesting that some bloke called John came down here and he chopped someone's head off in this alleyway. It's things like that for me.
And that's where I come from, my history, because so my background is I have a master's degree in creative and professional writing. I also love history. So my master's thesis was a work of historical fiction, because then you can take liberties, right? You can make the story more interesting. And so I live in a town in Colorado. It's a National Historic Landmark District. And what you were saying, it's not the same because we don't have this, we don't go back before 1859, but the town was founded in 1859. We have over 240 buildings in our town that are protected. So when you come to this town, you feel like you've been dropped back into the Wild West. maybe a little bit more avant-garde town. But and I moved here for no other reason than I liked the way it felt, and I liked that I could walk around here. And it's kind of not on the same level as London, but I'm always seeing new things and always finding out new history. And so I started a walking tour business. I do tours, which the pandemic has put the kibosh on. But so
Oh yeah, same, yeah. Well, if I come over there, I'll take a tour with you. I'd love to do stuff. I like American history. I don't know much about it. But whenever I'm there, if someone says to me, "Hey, this is where this happens," I want to go to the OK Corral. You see, I know that apparently it's not a particularly interesting place. Apparently it's just some tiny little I don't know, corner. But just the fact that it's so famous, I'd love to go there just because I've seen so many films about it.
But so when you give a tour, you have to engage your the people that come on your tour, or else it's. I mean, have you ever bombed on a tour?
Well, fortunately, you see, I'm not really a tour guide. I'm not really anything. I don't quite know what I am. The thing is, I just do the tours because people want me to, and so for me, it seems more like people just want to meet me. The idea of the videos is not to be a tour guide; it's to be entertaining. So I want to be a TV presenter. That's what I've always wanted to do. I just started doing these so I could prove to these stupid people in TV land that I can do it. And then I've ended up just finding that, well, actually, why wait for some spotty 21-year-old to come and ruin my idea when actually I've got an audience already waiting for me who already appreciate what I do. So a lot of people who come on a tour, it's almost like the hard work is already done. Sometimes I'll just go over a route which they've seen in a video already. They know all the facts about it, but they just want to be with me sort of laughing and joking. Half the time they want to talk. My sister says the secret is to keep them talking. If someone else, people love to talk. So if you go on a tour with somebody, get them talking about something, and by the end of it, they think that they feel like they've had a really good time because they've been talking so much.
That's a really good point. I'm going to remember that. So I was doing the straight history tours, but somebody told me, "Oh, you should do ghost tours." People like ghost tours. Yeah. The ghost tours, I sell so many more ghost tours than I do the other.
Yeah, I don't know why. Everyone always asks me for those as well, but I just don't know about it. And the thing is, if I'm not interested in a topic, I just tell people keep asking me for Harry Potter tours, and I say, well, look, I know I've done a video about it, but I'm not interested in Harry Potter, so I wouldn't be fun. You're better off going with one of the experts, But you've got your work cut out a bit more when doing a tour because, like, all I have to do is walk along some route that I already know, and I'll just point to a few things, laugh and joke, and complain about my health the whole time because that's all I ever do. But whereas with you don't know the person already, right. So you have a lot of work to do because you've got to win their trust and favor. Right. Whereas I don't. They already feel like they know me because they've seen. How
did you develop your following?
I just started uploading videos. That's all. That was it, really. I don't know what happened. It's really taken off in the last 12 months. It's gone crazy. I mean, I've got 140,000 subscribers now. I don't know how that happened.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know how that happened. I mean, really, about 2 years ago, I was on something like 5,000. It was crazy. But I mean, look, I'm not particularly surprised in that I think my videos are good. I mean,
they're great. They're great. And I think what you said before about you don't talk about what you don't talk about things that you're not interested in, and that's apparent. It's your enthusiasm and the humor, all that comes across in what you do.
Well, yeah, I also edit out anything that's, even and I edit out. I want it to be an interesting film, just something to keep your attention and to watch it. Now, anyway, I want it to be interesting, and they take a lot of time to make. I mean, it looks like they're just sort of rattled out, but they take ages.
How long does it take? How long does it take for you to do the editing, to do the video?
It all depends on the type of video. I mean, even that one that I did this weekend, which actually had a lot of old videos in it, so I just chucked in old clips. Mm-hmm. Even that one took.
I loved the narration, by the way. The narration was brilliant.
Yeah, when you see that.
stop here for today with the Julian McDonnell interview, but be sure to tune in next week for part 2, when he tells us about the time that 2 of Charlie Chaplin's grandchildren took a tour around London with him. And he tells us about the time he was a contestant on the show Blind Date. We still have our Kid Wisdom segment coming up, so don't go away. Today we'll be talking to Liam, who's 9 years old and lives in Denver, Colorado.
Because you're doing a podcast? That's how I've heard.
Yep. Do you know what a podcast is?
You could say almost like a show, except you don't really see anybody. They're just talking about some particular subject.
That's exactly right. It's something you listen to. My show is about history. Do you know what history is?
Yes. History is there's like events that happened in the past. Like a million years from now, this will probably be history. Like the coronavirus is spreading across like everywhere. 2020. Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's actually, you said it better than I could have said it. I have 3 basic questions that I'm going to ask you. If I have questions after you answer the questions, I'll ask you more questions, okay?
Okay.
Do you have any questions for me before we start?
I'm afraid not.
That's fine. That's great. If you have a question in the middle of it, then that's totally cool too. And you can't say anything wrong. Everything you say is going to be fine. Okay. So my first question for you is a question that I ask all my guests on the show. And it is, what is your favorite history?
I would say maybe the Titanic.
The Titanic? What's the Titanic?
The Titanic was one of the biggest steamliners of the early 20th century.
And so what do you like about that story, that history?
Well, I like historical machinery, and the Titanic is by far one of the most biggest machines ever documented in history.
Really? Wow. So tell me about the Titanic. What do you know about it?
Well, I know that it was an English ocean liner owned by the White Star Line, a ship company, and it hit an iceberg on, I think it was April 15th, 1912. Some people say it was April 19th, 1912, but I think that's just because some other historical thing happened. I think my dad called it the Oklahoma bombing.
Oh, so people get those 2 events confused because they happen so close together. Interesting.
Yeah, and so, it hit an iceberg that time, and the Titanic's actually one of the things that helps modern ships these days be so safe, because that accident helped both English and American governments realize that they need to be safer.
Liam is really smart, in case you haven't noticed, and he has a huge vocabulary for a 9-year-old. He obviously knows a lot about the topic of which he speaks. As I watch him through the computer screen, it's like I can almost see this battle between his advanced for his age intellect and his sweet little kid persona. The image of him and the words coming out of his mouth are incongruous in some ways. Wow. So what happened when it hit the iceberg?
Well, the impact of the iceberg, so, you can only see an iceberg from the top, but there's actually a lot of it on the bottom. So the impact of the iceberg scraped the side of the Titanic for a few seconds. The reason why it sunk is because when the iceberg scraped, it loosened the bolts that held the plates together. Luckily, the crew had put the fires out before they reached the boilers. They did have safety doors, but they couldn't close fast enough. If I was in that situation, I would just chop the rope that was like holding the doors
Gotcha. So
slowly.
you given a lot of thought to how you would act if you were in that situation.
Yep. Everybody's instinct was more of to go up to the boat deck to try to see the iceberg, and that's like not really how do you see if it's sinking or not. Some people actually went down to the doorway of the engine room and they looked in it and there was water. And this was like maybe an hour or two after the iceberg hit the Titanic. And those people who were smart enough to check in the engine room know it was going to sink. And actually, the builder of the Titanic was on that ship. And he didn't even want to like get out. He was just because everybody called it the unsinkable ship. And guess what happened? It sunk on its voyage, which in ship terms means first.
For some reason, we had a weird technical blip right there, and we missed a very important point that Liam was making. So I just reiterate. You said it was its maiden voyage, and you were telling me what that meant.
Yeah, it means first time out to sea. So, like, the ship's builder, he had called it unsinkable. And my dad said he wouldn't want to take a trip anywhere in mid-April because another incident happened in mid-April, the Apollo 13 accident, 1970.
Oh, wow. So April, the month of April is jinxed.
Yep.
A little further along in the interview, Liam cites a source from which he got most of his information about the Titanic.
It was like a audio book that was it wasn't taking any liberties with fiction or anything. It was a nonfiction audio book. It's called A Night to Remember. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I think I have, but I don't think I've listened to it or read it. So maybe that's something we should check out. I'll put that book in the episode notes so that people can check it out. Okay. And so what else did you want to tell me about the Titanic?
The captain's name was Edward. Well, most people just called him Captain Smith. So Captain Smith was actually planning to retire after he sailed the Titanic. He actually didn't make it to any of the lifeboats. He didn't even want to. He just stood on the bridge, which is like where you steer the ship with the steering wheel, and waited until the glass on the front of the bridge broke and sent water in. And I think he didn't die. Some people on the Titanic have claimed to see Captain Smith like floating in the water.
Were there survivors? So some people sunk with the ship, and then there were some survivors?
Yes. Out of like 2,300 people, only 701 survived.
Wow.
Or at least think. There might have been more people who survived. I know it was more people who sunk with the ship than the people who survived. And the reason that it is because the Titanic did not have enough lifeboats. Surprisingly, the amount of lifeboats back then wasn't based on the amount of people on the ship, but how big the ship was. Like if they had different safety rules, more people would have probably survived.
So if there were more lifeboats, do you think that more people would have survived?
Yeah. And after the Titanic sunk, they established this patrol kind of like thing. It's like in the Atlantic Ocean and Arctic Ocean, they established like this Coast Guard kind of thing that monitored conditions in the Atlantic Ocean.
So something good came out of a bad thing is what you're saying.
Yes. You can usually find something good that came out of bad things. Like World War II, that was really bad, but Adolf Hitler was defeated.
That was a good thing. I agree.
Yeah. I'm running out of words to say.
You're doing a great job. I think you're doing a great job. So was there anything else that you wanted to say about the Titanic?
Well, there's one more thing.
Okay.
One of the things why the Titanic actually did sink is because only 2 of the propellers could reverse. It had 3 propellers, one big and 2 small. Only the 2 small ones could reverse. And also, nature had kind of something to do with it a little because, like, the water was so cold, well, it kind of created an atmosphere. And the lookouts, because they didn't have, like, radar or monitors, they had lookouts, which are people who try to look for danger, couldn't see the iceberg in time. I actually heard from my audiobook that it was like a different story, that they saw the iceberg on the horizon. They telephoned the bridge, but the bridge didn't do anything for a while. Actually, they did turn. They steered the ship, but I think if they had only turned and not put it in reverse, they might have made it not sink. And there were some pretty brave acts on the Titanic that night. Miss Molly Brown, who is actually from Colorado, she lives in Denver where I am, and I've actually been to her house.
Oh, wow.
She earned the nickname Unsinkable Molly Brown. The reason why she earned that nickname is because she helped a lot of people to safety in the lifeboat.
Did she survive?
Yeah, she did. And, well, I think that's all.
Oh, that's a lot. I've learned a lot from talking about the Titanic with you. So there you have it, Liam's favorite history, the Titanic. Be sure to tune in next week when Liam and I discuss our mutual love of England and double-decker buses. Also, remember to check out our Patreon page, as well as keep up to date with the latest Armchair Historians news on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.